Hey guys, Kirk from the Forever Homestead. So it looks like spring might finally be here to stay. So I'm gonna take a couple of days and get the foundation of the house ready to be backfilled. So there's a few small projects that need to be done. Our electrical grounding needs to be connected to the plate and moved out somewhere away from the house. Heat pipe needs to be moved, things like that. But first we're going to get working on the waterproofing of the foundation itself. So follow along. So when they pour these poured foundations, they use wooden frames. They're like an inch thick or inch and a quarter thick, and they stack them side by side, and then they connect them. They connect them in the middle with. You can see the hole here. So this is a piece of steel that goes right through the concrete forms, and then when they're done. When the concrete's all poured in there, they just kind of break off these, they got like a shear end on them, so they just bust them off and then they can pull the forms away. So inside of this is the remainder of the pin that still goes all the way through. Now the concrete's, cured and everything around it, but this point here is one of the biggest points where water will penetrate, especially, closer to the, especially up more closer to the ground level. The water will get in there. And then in the winter that water will expand and you'll start getting cracks, and each of these locations will have water seeping into it. So I'm gonna do a couple of two different techniques to make sure this is damp proof. We went to all the expense of adding the basement, a walkout basement, to make it another level of the house, a living space. The thing with basements is they're always damp. They're damp, they're dark, they're cold, so we're spending extra money to make this level livable. We've put the in-floor heat in, we want to make it, we added the walkout so it's nice and bright down there, and now we want to make sure that it stays dry. So we're gonna do two different techniques. The first one, we're gonna tar it all, which is a messy job, but a lot of people just stop at that level. They tar it, they backfill, and then that should keep everything nice and dry in there. Especially with the sand, that's probably all we need. But we're actually gonna go one step further than that. Once we tar it, we're actually gonna put on this Dimple Wrap stuff here. It's finally out of the snow, but it's like I don't know if you can see that, it's got all these bumps on it. So when you lay this on the wall, and then you fasten it with screws and nails and stuff like that, but when it's on the wall, these air bubble or these dimples create an air space between the soil and the wall, and any water that does get back in here can drain out. So you'll put that on it and you'll run it all the way down to the footing here and over your drainage bed. So that, it's a couple of different steps. I haven't been able to do it up to this point just because there's so much snow and ice up there that the wall was always wet. So I finally got all the rest of the ice off of it yesterday. So I'm going to give it an hour or so to dry, and then we'll be able to start the process. We need to get in here and clean up a whole bunch of garbage. Holy cow, the snow's melted. So one of the first steps that I have to do is I'm going to put tar in each one of these holes. So I've got a product here. It's the same stuff. It's the same stuff that we're actually going to roll on, but this stuff they add a little there's like fiber in it to make it a little bit thicker. So I'll put it on with a putty knife, and I'll just put a little bit in each one of these holes. I'll just fill these holes with that tar stuff, and you can see there's 4 or 5 per seam here. So there's a lot of them, but it shouldn't take long to just go along with a putty knife and fill those all in. Alright, so I've got that all finished now. It took about an hour. It's not really hard or labor intensive work, it's just really messy. You get it all over the place by the time you're done. It's on this side they're kind of oozing out a little bit as the sun's warming them up a bit, so I might have to go back in about an hour and just make sure that everything's still filled in. But that's not really a big deal. I did these 3 here I shouldn't have actually done because that's going to be above grade, so I'll have to clean that out. And we'll have to that'll have to be filled with concrete, or yeah, concrete, because eventually this is going to have stone over it. But that'll have to dry for about a day probably. Have to read the can to make sure, but the next step now, once this dries, I'll have to snap a chalk line at my 7-foot mark, and then tar the whole wall. It's by the same company as this tar. It's just a little thinner. It doesn't have the fiber in it, so it just goes on with a paint roller. So once I have that chalk line, that'll give me a nice straight edge, and then we'll get the whole thing tarred and let it dry for another day. So it's probably still a couple of days off. As long as this nice weather holds, shouldn't be too big of a deal. So finally have a couple of days weather window here. It's nice and sunny today. Tomorrow's supposed to be the same thing, no rain for a couple of days. So according to this tar, it needs 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours. So I don't want to have to do this again. Not looking forward to it. So I've just spent the morning while things were kind of drying up a bit. I've been cleaning off the footings. You're supposed to make sure there's no concrete debris or, you know, the little pieces from the forms, sand, all that kind of stuff. So I've been giving that a sweep and shoveling it and clearing it. And it's about as good as it's going to get. So now, depending on who you talk to, there's different ways to put this stuff on. They have these big tar brushes. It looks pretty liquidy, so I'm going to try to put it on with just a paint roller. It'll go on a lot faster, that's for sure. But I have both things here. We'll see which one works best. So we're just finishing up on the waterproofing. We got the tar on, and it's dried for a couple of days. I don't really like the tar. If I could do this again, I think I'd use a different product. The cans of this roll-on, or this tar that we're using, say it can be put on with a roller or you know, a spray gun, brush, that kind of stuff. I think the only way to actually put it on effectively is with a sprayer. But I don't have a sprayer, and renting one, there's nothing really close, and the cleanup on it must be horrendous. So I ended up having to do 2 coats of the tar with the brush. I think the first time I put it on, it was too cold out. Of course, I didn't realize that because I've never done it before. You know, it says it needs to be above freezing or something like that, and I think that day was like 5 or 6, but I think the foundation was still too cold for it. So it didn't go on very well, and the imperfections in the concrete create like a void when you kind of roll over it, and then I think the air in there heats up and makes bubbles. The bubbles don't pop, so you know, it's still providing some protection, but the problem is this is a new house, and as it settles, you know, if any little cracks and stuff in the foundation and the concrete, it's gonna split the tar. So if I could do it again, I'd use a product that I've kind of researched since then called Blue Skin. So you have to put like a primer on the foundation first, and then it's like a sticky, really sticky membrane that you kind of spread on. And then I'd add the Dimple Wrap like I'm doing now. The Dimple Wrap, it goes on pretty simple. Sorry, I didn't set the camera up. It was windy and it kept blowing everything over. But basically, you set the roll on. So in this case, I set it on that end, and they say to roll it out 10 feet. It works better if you have somebody to help you hold the roll. But I just used the same chalk line that I have up there, and I just rolled it out. I'd roll it out 2 or 3 feet, and then every 2 feet, you put you nail on one of these washers, so it has the dimples in it, and it just fits down inside of the dimples that are on here, and then I just shoot out an 1.5 inch nail into it. So these seams on my concrete are 2 feet, so basically I put one there, and then 2 feet over I put one, and then you drop down about 6 inches from that, and you do the same thing every 2 feet, and you just kind of stagger between the first two, you know, so basically every foot it's being held. If it's over 7 feet tall, you're supposed to put one in, you know, midway down. This is a 9-foot roll that I'm using, and just because it's really windy out here near the bottom, every like, I don't know, 8 feet or 10 feet or so, I've just added just one nail just to hold it from flapping around. So now the extra, because I have a 9-foot roll, the extra actually works out really well. I just swept and cleaned off the footer, and then when he backfills, this will get pushed right in against the footing, and then basically if water hits this membrane, it's going to roll down the membrane and then over the footing and into my stone weeping tile bed. Once the sand and everything holds everything in, all this water is going down, and basically this lip is pretty much right on top of my weeping tile. So my weeping tile is basically right underneath because it sits right against the footing. So this is going to pour the water right on top of my weeping tile. So the house should stay nice and dry. The manufacturer says you don't have to tar behind it, but you know, one more level of protection. If you can get the tar on thick enough, they say it kind of acts as a little bit of a vapor barrier, but I don't really buy that because, you know, every little crack, and I just don't think so. And I'm not too worried about it because on the inside of the house we're blow foaming it anyway, so that's going to be our vapor barrier that we need. There's still a pile of gravel here that I have to shovel in over our weeping tile. So this tile here, it's wrapped in the cloth so the sand and stuff can't get down inside of the tile. But this has to be moved over, and it'll sit right against the foundation like that, and then I'll shovel that sand. But at least here you can see how the water would run down that Dimple Wrap, and then it'll fall on top of this once I get the gravel and everything shoveled in. I just need to clean out under here all the leaves, and you can see all the sand that's kind of blown in around it. But this is where it goes into the pit underneath, so I just got to clean all that out, push this all over to the wall, and get that gravel kind of shoveled in over here. But I just have a few more nails on this side to go. You can see I've kind of got the second row going here, up to about here. So I've just got to finish these, and then I've got to trim up. Sorry, it's really dark. I still have to neaten up this this angled here and put the second row on. And then there's a piece of trim that goes all along the top. So you put some caulking all along that top edge there, and then there's a piece of trim that actually goes over it, and that stops any sand and debris from blowing down in behind this Dimple Wrap, because that would just plug it up with sand and stuff, dirt, and then it wouldn't actually have the airflow behind it, which is the whole point of this stuff. So I'm just gonna get the rest of this on, and then I'll start on that trim. So yesterday was Saturday. I figured I got a call from my excavator saying that probably beginning of next week he'd be out to backfill. So I figured I had Saturday and Sunday to finish up a few little projects around here. Weeping tile at the back corner still had to get the gravel on it, the grounding plate, and a few odds and ends, and then finish the strip at the top of the trim piece at the top of the Dimple Wrap. Then my excavator called yesterday and said he was out in the area doing some exploratory holes for other people's septics, and he was going to drop the machine off here so it's ready for next week. Well, needless to say, dropping the machine off turned into him working for 5 hours. So really got a lot of the big hole there. Got a lot of the backfilling. He started all of moving stuff around. You can see the area I'm walking in here. He's not able to get the dozer through these spaces here, and it would put too much pressure on him. So next week he's got to come back in with the high hoe and the bucket, and next week he's got to come back in with the swing shovel and finish. But you can see the big hill's gone back here. We're almost up to the back. I asked him to stop, not go any higher, because I got to get the trim on all the way around. So because you don't want to get dirt down in here, so I've got to put some tar or some silicone and then the trim on, and then it'll be ready for him next week. So it's supposed to rain later on today, so I've got to kind of get at it and get this all filled in. But you can see he was working, got a big pile there. But it's kind of neat being able to, walk up to the back of the house. You can reach up and touch it now. So still have a couple feet to go, but it's looking good. I did get my I got the pipe fixed up. It was kind of running over the water pipe. I didn't want that. And you can see I've got my ground plate. It's out there somewhere now, so more than 3 feet of dirt over it, that's for sure. So code's good on that. But yeah, everything's looking good now. So I've got the trim on all the way around, except I am 1 piece short. I don't know how that's possible every single time. So it's not like 100% straight, but by tarring and then putting this trim on, it seals the gap between the Dimple Wrap and the house. So now when the excavator comes back in, I'm going to get him to top fill or fill this probably 2 or 3 inches, probably 3 inches above the trim. Like the sand's going to settle a bit, but like in the end, all of this black, all of the Dimple Wrap and the trim and all that are going to be underground by a couple of inches. The backyard here, once it's done, it's gonna kind of be fairly flat from the top of that out. I mean, it'll have a slight slant, like a slight slope away from the house, but we want to be able to put a fence around the backyard for dogs and, you know, kids and stuff like that. No, not our kids. We're not having any more. So it'll go back quite a ways, and then it'll slope off at a little bit more of a steep angle. Not too much. Right over there we're back to the forest floor. So, but it'll be less of a slope than this is. And then those couple of trees there, we're actually going to get rid of, just so, you know, the forest is kind of straight across, and then that makes it easier to, you know, grade everything and make it look nice. This side here, you can see right at the end there, I'm 1 piece short. They're about 6 feet long, so I'm just 1 piece short, so I'll have to pick that up, but it won't stop the backfilling. There's going to be armor stone at the end there anyway. But yeah, my excavator, he'll be back in probably Monday or Tuesday. He's got one other job to do, and then he can bring his swing shovel here. We'll get this all backfilled, and then we can get seriously working on the house. But more about that next time. Until then, have a good one.